Warm greetings from Thailand. This is Ray. My co-author is Amy Chris. Today I'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on women in Asia and Nigeria. Introduction. All over Asia, more than 17 million have been reported to have been affected by the pandemic, with over 300,000 people who died, which included women. In Nigeria, about 188,243 cases have been reported by almost the end of August, and 2,000 people have died. All of these have included women. The pandemic affects everyone without exception, but the pandemic has unique impacts on women. This paper has two research questions. What is the impact of the pandemic on women in Asia and Nigeria? What are the responses of women in Asia and Nigeria to improve their situation under this health emergency? Methodology. This paper is a qualitative case study that produces a grounded theory. The research sites are Asia and Nigeria. For the data collection for Asia, documents of Asia-based international non-governmental organization, which has consultative status with the United Nations, were used. These were the products of consultations with member organizations of this international NGO who have been regularly meeting during the pandemic, including women's organizations. Themes discussed included health, women, the impact of the pandemic. For the Nigerian case study, data collection included the use of documents from all different sources, public recording, as well as official press releases and statements. After which, data were analyzed through coding, coming up with themes, and creating a storyline, after which a grounded theory was developed. First, on Asia. The Asian case study covered countries from the north in Japan, to the south in Australia and New Zealand, to the east in Indonesia and East Timor, and to the west in Iran. These are all of the places where the international organization has reached, and in many consultations over Zoom meetings, live discussion, women and men from these regions have attended all of these gatherings. The first question, what is the impact of the pandemic on women in Asia and Nigeria? First, for Asia, these are the 6 major impacts of the COVID-19. 1, Asian women bear increased burden. 2, there's a general impact on Asian women. 3, food insecurity. 4, violence against women in Asia. 5, impact on Asian domestic workers. And 6, loss of economic opportunities. Let's go one by one over these issues. Number 1, on the impact on Asian women, according to the United Nations Women in Asia Pacific region, they said there are 4 major impacts of the pandemic. 1, during the lockdowns, predominantly male security forces have increased misconduct because of the need to check the status of people crossing borders, crossing cities, to going to other cities, and a lot of misconduct happened during these physical checks. Number 2, there's increase in domestic violence against women because both partners stayed at home during the lockdown and quarantine. And number 3, resources for patients were diverted away from women because when they go to the hospitals or clinics, they were told to go home. And number four, there's an increased expectation for women to take care of the family, at the same time taking them away from gaining income during the pandemic. And according to the World Food Program in Asia, based in Thailand, women have experienced food insecurity. Number one, because of the pandemic, people are more vulnerable to food insecurity. Number two, women are expected to bear the burden to ensure that there is water and table at the table for the whole family, oftentimes extended family. And number three, 65 million Asians are susceptible to food shortages. In terms of violence against women, the Anglican Bishop Genevieve Blackwell of Melbourne, Australia, which is part of the Asian International NGO, the pandemic worsened the already unequal treatment of women who suffer violence against women, including human trafficking. And according to the United Nations Women's Office for the Asia Pacific region in Thailand, the situation of women worsened during the pandemic because resources meant for detecting cases of human trafficking were redirected to closing down borders to ensure lockdown. And in addition, the International Organization for Migration indicated that human trafficking had increased during the pandemic, and also when there's the economic recession, therefore there's decreased opportunities for labor migration. And according to the General Secretary of the Young Women's Christians Association of Bangladesh in Dhaka, 4.5 million textile and garment workers are internal migrant workers who originally come from the villages to work in the city, in Dhaka, 50% of whom are women. They're mostly single and live alone. During the crisis, they are at the greater risk of gender-based violence. And according to Bishop Philip Huggins of Australia, who is also the president of the National Council of Churches of Australia, women have experienced work stoppage, which therefore affect their income as well, which affects not only them individually, but also the families to whom they send the money, and also to the villages, to the communities, and to the national economies. But for those who are able to keep their jobs, their employers, who are middle class employees themselves, have lost their jobs, and children stay at home. So the Asian domestic workers have increased workload because the whole family is at home, and they also have increased chances of getting the virus because oftentimes Asian domestic workers do not have their own single bedroom. And another impact of the pandemic on Asian women would be the loss of income. According to the South Asians for Human Rights in Asia, the United Arab Emirates government had allowed companies to decrease salaries, and Asian workers do not have access to redress their grievances. And this has increased the mental health challenges of Asian workers. And according to Hanbit Ree, who's with the Youth Commission of the World Council of Churches in Geneva, Switzerland, in South Korea, women ministers were the first to be laid off because they're considered non-essential workers in churches. And according to the Global Alliance Against Trafficking in Women, the pandemic had led to 6 major issues. 1, closure of businesses. 2, violation of labor contract. 3, problems in the system of recruiting workers. Number 4, exploitation at the workplace. Number 5, non-payment or late payment of wages. And 6, all of which lead to human trafficking in Asia. Now let's go to Nigeria. According to Amy Chris's research, these are the four major impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on women in Nigeria. One, healthcare. Two, increased poverty. And many women who are in unsecured, low-paying jobs in the informal sectors are involved in micro businesses. And since they have lost their job during the pandemic, and in addition, they have the burden of taking care of the household as well as for the sick, including extended family members. Number three, this has a great impact on the economy, including women who also contribute their income for family use. And number four, there's an increase in sexual and gender-based violence. Since couples now stay at home and see each other 24 hours, and the chances for gender-based violence increases. Now, in response to the second question, so what are being done to improve the conditions of women in Asia and in Nigeria? In Asia, women during the gatherings, when they were reflecting on what they've been doing in their own context, stated that they are calling for women empowerment and transformational leadership. They realize that during this crisis, not so many women are in position of authority to take charge and make decisions. But now they say it's about time that women are involved in decision making to be part of the leadership so that we will be able to uplift humanity as a whole. Number two, Pakistani women in particular, and also Asian women in general, have been engaged in organizing and mobilizing civil society to provide for food, as well as assist in putting in place health measures. And number three, based on all of these focus group discussions during consultations, Asian women called for unity to work together at different levels. And in Nigeria, the situation of women had been weakened due to the lockdown, and women do not have enough resources, and as well as there's now reduced donor capacity, and the poverty situation is perpetuated. But as we can see, this paper is not theory-led, but is theory-producing. The impact of the pandemic on Asian women would include women's health, women's income, sexual and gender-based violence. And in response, they are both similar and different. In Asia, Women for Collaboration, and organized support groups, they demand to be part of transformational leadership, and they call for governmental action. In Nigeria, based on Amy Chris's research, women were involved in online meetings, online learning, and also businesses. In conclusion, the pandemic has a lot of challenges, and it affects a lot of vulnerable groups, including women and girls. And this has impact on women's health, loss of economic power, including jobs and income. And there's an increase in sexual and gender-based violence. In summary, the context in Asia and Nigeria are very different, but women in both Asia and Nigeria have similar experiences. One, the impact on their health. Two, the loss of jobs and income, as well as economic power. And three, increase in sexual and gender-based violence. In summary, while, women in Asia and Nigeria live in very different contexts, they have similar experiences. One, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their health. Two, loss of economic power. Three, increase in gender-based violence. However, women's actions take different forms in Nigeria and in Asia. In Nigeria, women engage in online communication, businesses, and workshops. In Asia, women collaborate, form support groups, and call for governments to take action. Thank you. If you have questions, Amy and I would be very happy to respond to your questions.